British colonial policies de-industrialized India. High tariffs blocked Indian exports. British goods flooded local markets.
Our policies will secure this land and its wealth.
Friends, due to the policies followed by the British, the Indian economy rapidly transformed into a colonial economy, whose nature and structure were determined by the needs of the British economy. The British completely disrupted the traditional structure of the Indian economy. Furthermore, the British never became an integral part of Indian life. They always lived here as foreigners, exploiting Indian resources and taking Indian wealth away as tribute. Thus, the Indian economy was made subordinate to the interests of British trade and industry. The consequences of this are visible in various forms. As you know, the British ruled India for nearly 200 years. The nature of exploitation did not remain the same over this long period. It changed over time, and on this basis, colonial rule is divided into 3 phases. Let's understand these phases in detail. 3 phases of economic exploitation. To understand the changing economic character of colonial rule, Indian scholar R.P. Dutt has divided it into 3 phases. The first phase lasted from approximately 1757 to 1813 and is called the phase of mercantilism or commercial capitalism. In this phase, the British had 2 main aims: establishing a monopoly over trade and commerce, and finding a solution to the bullion problem. By bullion problem, we mean that the British had to use their own gold, silver, and coins to purchase goods from India, which was not favorable from a mercantilist perspective. To establish a monopoly, the British East India Company gradually eliminated other foreign companies. The bullion problem ended after the Battle of Plassey, which we will consider in detail later. This phase primarily focuses on the drain of wealth from India and direct colonial plunder by the East India Company. This is where the colonial exploitation of India's economy begins. The second phase, from around 1813 until 1860, is known as the phase of industrial capitalism. By this time, the Industrial Revolution had begun in England, and goods were being manufactured on a large scale. A market was needed to sell these goods. Furthermore, for the further growth of British industry, a large amount of raw materials was needed. The Charter Act of 1813 ended the East India Company's monopoly. Simultaneously, the colonial government initiated a one-sided free trade policy, whereby manufactured goods from Britain to India were duty-free, and raw materials from India to Britain were also duty-free. However, heavy duties remained on any finished product exported from India to England. For example, a 300% duty was imposed on Indian textiles. Thus, during this period, India witnessed de-industrialization and ruralization. In short, the phase of industrial capitalism transformed the Indian economy into a market for British goods and a supplier of raw materials. The third and final phase, which began around 1860 and lasted until 1947, is known as the phase of financial capitalism. During this period, the British began investing capital in India. This was because industrialization had begun to spread to other countries around the world, such as Germany, Japan, and so on. This increased competition for British industries. To survive, the cost of production needed to be reduced, and at the same time, the British accumulated considerable capital by accumulating profits during the previous phase. Investment opportunities were being sought. Investing in India also reduced transportation costs and provided cheap labor. Therefore, during this period, British capital rapidly flowed into India. However, its purpose was not to promote industrial growth in India, but to exploit Indian resources. British capital was invested only in activities that complemented British industries. According to one estimate, before 1914, approximately 97% of British capital was invested in the development of railways, merchant shipping, mining, and financial houses. Having broadly understood the aspects, let us now discuss the economic